All right, thanks. We're back. So, Kerry Cassidy, my guest tonight. Thanks for coming on, Kerry. And my 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 hope is that maybe you'll clarify some things with us. But thank you. And you've been. I know you've been an investigative journalist. You've been going down so many rabbit holes for so many years. But this is kind of the big one. I mean, where are we? Do you think in 2024? And maybe that's too broad. You start wherever you want to. I just want to hear what you think we need to know at this point.
Okay, well, thank you, Lee, or Dr. Merritt. I wish I should call you,
That's fine.
but
That's fine.
it's great to have to be meeting you and to be on your show. I'm really hoping you'll come on my show very soon.
Sure.
So, and then we can turn tables. At the moment, I think all bets are off. I do think that the white hats are coming forward finally. I think that Juan O'Savin is hinting that, and I don't think they can wait much longer. I think our country is going to be gone if they don't. If they do, so indications are that there's going to be a return of President Trump, and that what Juan said in a recent video is that families are going to be talking in the sort of everyday world, saying we have two presidents. So, and that's supposed to be sometime in the next few months, maybe even if it takes till June, I don't know. That just seems like a long time away. So I don't know when exactly. But once people are of the understanding, I don't know where you're at with this and all this. So,
Yeah. No.
um, but that Jan Halper Hayes went on a British television show. She works with the DOD and announced that Trump had dissolved
Saw that.
the US corporation and that he put back in place the Republic. He is president and CIC, commander in chief of the Republic. And this is going to be coming out. So, this I definitely think will happen in the next 6 months, let's say, max, hopefully sooner than that. My understanding is also that there's going to be an event in which he needs to step forward as commander in chief to deal with on behalf of the American people, and that in a sense he'll come forward as a kind of a hero in that regard, and that will change everything. So, not sure what that's going to be. I was talking on a recent show saying that there's a possibility. One has talked about very briefly over the last few months that we know that China is putting missiles right now in Cuba. So this is a return to
Hmm.
the Cuban Missile Crisis, if you will, but it's from the angle of China rather than Russia. So if that should
Wow.
happen, you can see where that they are doing that to warn us away from Taiwan because we are placing ships near the coast of Taiwan. So that's kind of where that's at. And I don't know if there's any real, movement happening. I think they're keeping this very hush hush so far to the American public. But it's very interesting how we seem to be going, I was saying, in a kind of a groundhog day, because we are also back fighting Nazis and totalitarianism. So we have returned to revisit these sort of incredible crises and perhaps to come at them a different way or something. And so I think that's in the offing. I think that our world is going to have to change. In other words, I think this is late in coming. I think we should have already faced some of these things. I think that war is not the answer. So that countries are going to have to negotiate themselves out of these situations. There's so much secrecy on the part of the white hats, on the part of the dark hats, as we call them, or the cabal. And it's really, this is a time of exposing the secrets. So all of that is going to change our trajectory into the future of humanity and planet Earth. by default. So I think that's where we're at. I know that's a very, it's kind of a high picture, it's from a long distance, but if you just want to know overall. And I also think that the disclosure of the alien presence and interaction with humans is also long overdue. I think we've started to graze the surface there. I think that's coming forward. So I think that this could be a jam-packed year in these regards. From what I understand, again, from the point of view of the White Hats, Juan O'Sabin has been saying for a while that we might not, it'll at least be delayed. And I think that will be in part because of this other crises that Trump is going to have to come forward, that the military will also have to take, there'll be probably a period of martial law because there will be plenty of people who are rebelling against the idea of Trump going into office. And they will be instigated to do so as well, just like in January 6th, which I believe was a Democratic and I guess intel agencies operation. So I'm not sure where to go because it's such a big, there's so many different topics. If you have very specific questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, sure. I do actually. I'm with you on that. I've been saying for a long time, I think there's somebody in the background here, and we can call them white. People that say, "Oh, this white hat stuff's nonsense." I said, "Well, you can call them what you want, but number one, I just don't think our military, and I was in the military for 12 years roughly. I don't think our military didn't make a plan for exactly this scenario. I mean, this is what they do with all their field grade officers to keep them busy in peacetime is they have them sit around and think in these war colleges about what you would do when Borneo attacks California. I mean, improbable things they look at. So don't tell me they didn't think about having this happen. The other thing, when the inauguration happened, I didn't see it with the discerning eyes that Derek Johnson did. But I said at the time, I said, wait a minute.
At least initially. And so I think that that's what he did. I think he had no choice if he wanted to run for office because everything is so locked down. Our government has been taken over. The evidence of the steal is prolific. As I've said many times, and Jan Halper Hayes has also said this recently, is that Space Force has it all. It's not just Space Force. I believe it's also the NSA. There's evidence that the NSA has, at least part of that agency has gone over to back the White Hats and Trump. And that's because the head of the agency was in hiding as a bad guy his last name is Rogers. And
Admiral Rogers. Yeah. I didn't know he was a bad guy. I thought this started with him giving the data to the good guys.
Yes, that's right. He gave the data to that Trump was being spied on. And he did it after all these years of climbing the ladder, though, and fitting in, if you will. So
gotcha. That's really,
call it what you will. These generals, I basically would just say these generals have to kiss a lot of ass to get to the top. I mean, I think that this goes with the territory every time in every discipline, not just, in Hollywood. It's always the case. And perhaps you've seen that in your own career. But it's very, very difficult to get ahead without making friends, if you will, with the people at the top. So
well, and I also think the top is invariably taken over by the bad guys because they promote their own people up. You may look like they're free and open promotions in the military, but no, they're always, and at the top it's always political. Above 2 stars, it's all political appointments. So they just put their own people in there, and that applies to every pyramidal structure, whether it's a church, an organ, any organization. If you got enough people and you got a small top, they're promoting their own. I just see that's how the evil crept in.
100%. And because we've got secret societies behind these top officers and so on, and that's very prolific. So they keep their hands in, and they keep the top. They weed out any rebels. And some of my whistleblowers have been rebels in that way, and they've had to step down. They just get kicked out. They get asked to leave.
Yeah.
If they don't have the right attitude, if their attitude is too sympathetic to the public and to humanity, that they're out. So that's
And I
that's
don't
what we're.
think we can. Yeah, I don't think we can soft pedal the fact that we're dealing also with the people at the top are practicing the old religion and actually pedophilia and horrible things that are going on, and that is so bad that people those secrets are kept so close. I mean, they make the Sicilian mob look like choir girls. I think that's what's been going on, and so I heard you say this, and I think it's true that you can't expect people to always look like who they are. This is a big information war. You can't come out and if you play your cards too soon, they just take you out.
Exactly. And, it's kind of, I think The Godfather is the best sort of learning tool in this regard. You see how they operate. And if you keep that going, at the end of the day, there's no one left, as you know. So we're looking at a situation where they have to make deals. I recently did an interview with Mike Gill. I don't know what you want to call it. It wasn't just me and Patriot Underground, and he's a whistleblower, as you may know, and he was very kind of overexcited and perhaps condemning the White Hats for not acting sooner. But the trouble is that, and this is something that I guess Juan was saying recently, which is it's like when we invaded in D-Day, and timing is everything. And they're using, I guess you know this, they're using an AI. Okay, the dark side's using an AI, and the white hats are using an AI, and they're also using generals, the generals loyal to Trump. So there's a decision-making apparatus there. It's not just one man. And what they're coming to the conclusion after strategizing this, sometimes Nino Rodriguez was saying something like, thousands of times, even in one day, to strategize the moves for the next few days. And as the timeline changes, as the actions are taken by the dark side, they have to react and they have to act. So this is what they're doing. And I think you can't underestimate the seriousness of where we are now on the planet. We hang in the balance. Our freedoms hang in the balance. We're about to turn over to this Klaus Schwab New World Order transformation, banking cartel takeover, where you can't even spend a dime without them knowing where it is and where you spent it. And so, their surveillance society is so extensive. And so if we don't speak up now, I don't think we're going to be able to in the future.
Yeah, I mean, a cashless society is a totally totalitarian society. So the good news on that, and the thing that comforts me there, is it's like I don't think the mob and all the illegal guys would go for that because they can't function in that world. I just have to point that out.
It's worth looking at, yeah, for sure. And I think that there's a lot of disagreement on that level as well. But my understanding is that the monetary system is also completely controlled by off-planet entities. So you go to the families at Basel, Switzerland, and above them are non-human entities. And
okay, I was going to ask you that. If we're going to, are we talking reptilians here? I'm just going to ask because they're all, the symbology is everywhere. I just have to say this.
Yes, it is. It's everywhere on our planet. So, you've got to be sort of deaf, dumb, and blind not to have seen it. So it's, it's in every religion. It's on every temple and all of this. So, yeah. So this is what Zachariah Sitchin called them the Anunnaki. That goes back to the Sumerian tablets.
Yeah.
I think that's as good a name as any. It's more of a bucket term. It's not even just one race in the end of the day, but for simplicity and to understand where we're going. One of my whistleblowers, Bob Dean, going back to the day, he was a wonderful whistleblower. He was in a command sergeant major in the Army, and he basically said, the Anunnaki are walking the halls of the Pentagon, is how we put it.
Wow.
So when you look at that, and I understand from my whistleblowers, including Captain Mark Richards, including a more recent whistleblower called Major Solomon Berg, that they're heavily involved in Dimona and in Israel. So they are running Israel behind the scenes. And I'm told that by other whistleblowers that the monetary system, in the end of the day, the reins on it are kept by the off-planet individuals.
That makes that, and I suspect the legal system we could put in there too. I've been saying,
So,
we live in a Babylonian system of our monetary system and our legal system, and that what we have to do is step out of Babylon. I'd probably use Sumer, but the problem is most people don't know about the Sumerians. But Babylon rings a bell. That's biblical stuff, and they talk about that. So, and it really is an artificial construct that we're living in, that we need, that as individuals we can step out of to a degree. Now there's some things that they're coming after us with we can't, but once it becomes universal cashless, that's when we're really in, I say we're in trouble, but even then, that's why we have a whole big history of black markets. I don't even think they just can't seem to take these little humans down.
Well, I think we're right on the verge of, though, a really a planetary takeover by the elite, and actually what they want to do is decimate humanity down, to 500 million or whatever it is, as the Georgia Guidestones stated. So we've got them probably planning some very diabolical things in the offing right now. So far, we've made it through, but I'm not sure what's going to have to take place. What kind of a war, what kind of a takedown of the dark side is going to have to take place in order for these final steps to go through, and for us to basically, be victorious.
Well, it's interesting. So I guess I've just had a lot of disparate bits of data come to me, and one of them along these lines. I mean, I went to January 6th, and on January 7th, I was in the hotel. I had lived in DC, so I said, I'm getting a hotel outside the Beltway, which was a good move. So I didn't get trapped in that lockdown that the mayor did. But anyway, the next day there was a guy, and I heard him talking to a group of people, and it sounded like he had some intelligence. So when everybody there left, I kind of went over to him and I said, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but it sounds like that you've, had some communication with people involved in, like, for whatever you want to call it, the take back, that there are people out there in the background working for us. And he said, well, he was a computer guy. He says, and I got the idea he might have been intel at one time, but he said, all I know is that I'm periodically asked to do some research. I send the information off and I never hear from it again. And I said, well, do you know who you're sending it off? He says, I've heard the name, the Alliance of Generals, but I can't prove anything. And he said, and I've heard also that there are about 10,000 of us, the researchers like him. So I got that was told to me, and I've had other people that I run into that were DIA, DNI kind of people, and periodically it's just, the intelligence services are on both sides here. There's people from both sides, but and I think that it's hard to get away from the idea that at the top of this there's something that's not human, because they're geoengineering the world. They're geoengineering the world for something other than us. Because Bill Gates and those guys, they can hide in their big mansions for war, and they can bury themselves in the ground against meteor showers maybe, but they can't save themselves from CO2 going any lower, even though that's what they're trying to do. We're at an all-time low. It's just science. So
that's right. Yes. So, they are still carbon life forms in theory. So they have
maybe not Bill Gates.
But I think, and I also interviewed a number of doctors on this as well. So I can say that my back channel intel did reveal that there is this nanographene oxide that works with the spike proteins. It's a package. and possibly the snake venom is involved somehow. But I can tell you that according to secret NASA scientist testimony, what this does is it jumps from person to person. And it's nano, of course, is naked. You can't, see it. You can't see it with the naked eye. So I have an individual that is David Adair, and I've interviewed him a number of times. He is literally a rocket scientist, but he also is an expert on AI, and the government has consulted him on AI. He's interviewed Sophia, the citizen of Saudi Arabia, and come up with some fascinating things. But I've interviewed him a number of times, met him in person, been on conferences where we both were speaking and so on. And I can tell you that he describes in one of my videos very carefully exactly what happens with the nano when it gets into your body, the black,
Yeah.
the nano.
Well, we'll have to talk about that because I've gone down that rabbit hole too. We'll see here. Well, we're going to take a little break here. Don't forget to use the code REBEL at the store, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes with Kerry Cassidy. Heather, sorry, I'm asleep at the switch here. Okay, so we're back with Kerry Cassidy. I'm so sorry. My New Year's starting off great. So there's always a glitch. Anyway, well, we'll have Kerry come on back. We were just talking on the off time about, some of the technology, the issues that are going on that, the question is, did we actually develop this technology, or again, was this all passed down from higher beings to give to us? Because some of this just does not make sense that it could have come de novo. And what do you think? I mean, are we getting, is this technology transfer from the bad guys, for example?
Well, okay. I did, like I said, a lot of investigation. I have whistleblower testimony on this. There's a particular individual called Cyrus Parsa. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
I do know him. I don't know him. I've heard of him.
Okay, but I got to know him pretty well. I even met him in person and had him on my show a number of times. Now, he and I don't agree on everything, but there's no doubt that his investigations led him to believe that this particular bioweapon that our scientists, and you're right, didn't start in China. It actually started from what I understand, Fort Detrick, and went from there and eventually got to China and was maybe dispersed from there. But the bottom line is that it's a recipe that was given, my understanding is from alien AI to our scientists over, like in computer text, that sort of thing. So what we're talking about is a gray ET takeover of the planet. And because people don't want to talk about grays, they don't want to talk about, the bottom line is that these gray ETs are reptilians. So a lot of them are what you call programmable biological entities, but there's also others that are not quite the same. So a programmable biological entity is what our military calls them. But in essence, that's an AI, if you understand. So what we're talking about is an AI consciousness that is also pervasive in the reptilian, and a takeover of the reptilians and the Draco. And it's interesting because there are remote viewers. There's an individual professor, you might have heard of him, called Courtney Brown. He has a number of expert remote viewers, and they have remote viewed this sort of subject or arena. And what they found is that there is an AI that has been taking over a galaxy next to us and is now on its way and has been infiltrating our galaxy. And according to one of my whistleblowers, Captain Mark Richards, who is he was a former Navy captain who was involved in what's called the secret space program, and his father was involved. So it goes back. Also, his grandfather worked with Tesla. So he has a whole lineage in his family of working in these secret, above top secret areas of our secret space program. Anyway, so he also talked about what's happening here. They're terraforming our Earth, as you even alluded to earlier. So what we're talking about is an alien race that is reptilian at the root, that is also influenced by AI, that seems to have gotten control over those races, and they're trying to take over our planet. So this is a very serious takeover. In other words, this is not just crazy Nazis. We have those
No,
also.
no. They were
But
just
this is
being used by this, right?
right. So it goes far beyond. We're looking at a complete takeover of the human body and of our genome and of also of the planet, terraforming it, as I say, taking oxygen out of it. They prefer a methane like, believe it or not. So this is where we have been invaded, and it's actually it's a major. I mean, it's absolute. And for us to remain quiet and to be naive about this is insane. And it should be much more, general knowledge at this point. I mean, we had the UAP hearings recently, and Grush, the CIA agent who got a lot of whistleblowers reporting to him, and then he came forward with the information. All of the information he was reporting is something that I've been investigating the last 20 years in Project Camelot through.
Well, here's my favorite picture that says to me what you're saying is exactly right, and that is the fact that it's got to be a non-carbon based life form that wants to do this. I'm just saying, it's just creepier than you can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and if people don't talk about it and start sounding the alarm and become awake and aware in this regard, this is where it comes in also, because these beings, whether they're reptilians, Draco, or Greys, feed on our glandular substances,
like adrenaline.
and and basically, this is what we're talking about. They consider it an aphrodisiac, and they are eating us and consuming us and taking us over. And they're also they have a that has been creating gray human hybrids for the last even maybe 100 years. And the military is wide awake about this. They know all about it. They were initially they were invading the United States, and what the military did was make a deal with them to go south of the border. And so they gave them free reign in Mexico, South America, Central America. And what we've got now is we've got a lot of gray human hybrids that are come out of the root race, have basically been genetically re-engineering the Latino race, okay? And a lot of those are now fully what you might say is half gray. And what that does is they are programmable and they are mind controlled. So what we see in these droves of people coming towards the border right now is a lot of them are programmed, and they don't even really know what they're doing. They're just leaving their homes and joining the crowds and headed for where they're told to go. So this, I mean, the X-Men, is actually predictive programming. You do understand. So we're dealing with a race that is very cold. Their minds are very cold. They don't have a lot of emotionality, and they also have some abilities that we don't. We have those abilities, but we don't, exhibit them. We don't explore them, and so we don't use them predominantly.
Well, I mean, this is when we talk about psychopaths, I remember in medical school, they told us 4% of the world were psychopaths, but now they're saying it's closer to 10%. So that goes along with what you're saying. And psychopaths are not what we see in the movies. That's the other thing, is they own the movies. They're not telling us the truth. They always make it look like it's the Jeffrey Dahmer solo guy, one crazed lunatic. But no, these guys tend to be really smart, really very charismatic, and they can cooperate with each other in their own interest. But like reptilians, that's why we're cuddly mammals and we're not reptilians. Reptilians are more of a, hunt. And that's the behavior that it's just the flight or fight kind of very basic behavior that we're seeing in psychopaths. And they can recognize each other, but we can't recognize them. That's another big deal. When I was in the Navy, there were studies being done on that, about how to recognize psychopaths, because they didn't want psychopaths under the Arctic ice for 3 months on a fleet ballistic missile sub. And that was the one psychological problem they could not screen out because they are undetectable by standard means. That's the problem. Yeah,
I
it's a
believe
real
it.
problem. Even if they were
Absolutely.
humans and that they're taking over with that psychiatry, it's a real problem. Now, do you think I got to ask you? So I'm really hot on this thing, and again, this I became interested when I started hearing all these little disparate pieces of data, and then it hit home when I realized. Then I started looking at this from a medical standpoint, and I could see that it was true that something is coming out of these underground tunnels, and it's like here's the example in downtown Omaha, which is not that far from me. There was a news story now. Utah. And one of the things I saw was the father was saying, how could this have happened? Because my kid, I can't remember if it was a son or daughter, had puncture wounds all over him or her. How did nobody make a sound? How did 4 people be taken over by one guy? You're telling me it's one guy and nobody made a sound. So there's something wrong with the story. So it's almost like they were paralyzed, right? Well, then this happened in Omaha where, something's wrong when the government and the medical authorities are lying to you about what's going on. They said this guy was attacked had human bite wounds. 2 guys showed up at Methodist Hospital. I don't remember the hospital somewhere with human bite wounds, but then they show a picture of these 2 guys. Now I'm a trauma surgeon. This guy had a cut going from one side of his forehead all the way to his other ear. That's not a human bite wound. There's something wrong. And he couldn't get away. He had bite wounds all over. He had these things all over him, but his friend had to save him. Some other guy came along and saved him downtown in the city in dark. He got a little bit beat up, but not like this kid. What's going on here? Why was the other guy helpless? And then the third one was there's this woman who claims that she was with her friends. They were out boating on some river, the Colorado or some river in a canoe. And again, they show her picture in the hospital and she's got puncture wounds all over her leg. And they're saying she was bitten by, wait for this, an otter. No, I'm sorry, guys. Otters don't do that. And again, why did she have to be rescued by her friends? Because she couldn't move. So the story goes that these uncharacterized subterranean life forms come out of these tunnels and they have tetrodotoxin in their claws, which is the pufferfish toxin, and they paralyze you. So you have 30 seconds to a minute, and after that, you can't move, and then they can consume you. Now, is this something is this a bioengineered? Do you think this is going on? And if so, is it bioengineered or, whatever? I know that this is why all these UV lights are going up. That is what this is about. Whatever they want to tell you, it's not because they're putting them on the top of subway cars because these things are coming out in the subway tunnels.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's
Or
interesting.
maybe that's not something you've run across. I don't know.
Well, it sounds a lot like the chupacabra stories, as you may
Yes,
know.
those were bioengineered, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So I don't know
Yes,
about these.
but again, they come from somewhere. I think that these are derivatives of the actual, what we're talking about, which is various ET races and certain
Right.
of them having certain proclivities. And I don't think I even want to go down that road to explain to people what it could be. You know what I mean? I don't want to gross people
I
out
just
too
wonder
much,
if
but
you'd gotten into that. Yeah.
not
It's interesting
much.
because it's
I know
interesting
about
because too, just
stuff.
for fun, just pay attention to the bedbug comms, the bed bugs. They're saying, oh, these bed bugs in Paris, but then they show you pictures of the bed bugs. You can't see bed bugs this way. They're not bed bugs in the subways. That's a comm of some sort. They're letting people know, I think, that these things are coming out. Again, just from a medical
Well,
standpoint, I see stuff they're lying about. It can't be the story they're telling us.
exactly. Well, I mean, this goes on to all aspects. So I think that that's some kind of life form. It could have initially started in a lab. It's very diabolical sounding. I haven't heard those stories
It goes along
specifically.
with the booms, the underground war. I guess that was what I really wanted to ask you
That's
about if you've been
possible.
following
I
that.
do know that the white hats are going into underground bases and rescuing children. What people don't know so much, although the remote viewers have depicted this, is they're having to do battles with reptilians. I mean, this
Yeah.
is what's happening. And then at a certain point, these are nests, if you will. I mean, it
I've
sounds
heard that. Hives.
this is what we're dealing with. I mean, if people don't begin to realize and wake up to this, then they're absolutely, we're going to be in so much trouble. I mean, we're already in tons of trouble. So I think that waking people up to this kind of thing is really vital. I can say that there was a find, or there is a find, south of the border in Mexico. And there are also some things like that happening down there, to where you can't even go to those areas, and the cartels are guarding them. They won't let humans down there. There's all kinds of infestations, if you want to call it that. And
So are the cartels helping on that situation? Are they trying to protect the people, or are they protecting the bad things? I don't.
They're guarding the finds, the knowledge that comes with the finds. These are in some cases they're crystal skulls, they're reptilian skulls, they're made out of jade and various other substances.
They're like the archaeologic finds that they're guarding.
Right.
Oh,
and
okay.
They're finding underneath there. So, this is a vast unexplored area, right? That's going on subterranean and in underground bases. And I'm sure they've encountered this sort of thing. As far as what you're talking about, it may be localized. I know that there are these spider beings, supposedly, that also have been coming to the planet, infesting certain areas. They were there at Angkor Wat initially. I don't know if you know that story. One of my witnesses, Captain Mark Richards, told the story to me, and I'll just tell you briefly what happened. So in Angkor Wat, it's known that there was a human civilization that disappeared virtually overnight. And the understanding is that they were invaded through a portal by some spider beings. And that what they do is they mind control their victims. So in this case, they mind controlled the people of Angkor Wat, even though they had a river going down the middle of their town, to think that they were running out of water. So when they do that, they weaken them, and the entire town just disappeared virtually overnight. Goes back in time, this story. So apparently Vietnam was not what people think it was. Right. It was actually another invasion from off-world, and it's through portals that a lot of these invading races come, that open up here on our planet in different various places. And Peru certainly has a number of these portals, and other places as well.
Have you ever read, there's a book, and the joke was, my husband always said, my ex used to say that I had read more books on the commandant's reading list, the Marine commandant's reading list, than most Marine officers, because I just, I was home with the kids and I was reading books, and those were what I read. But anyway, Ender's Game. And Ender's Game is a story. Yeah, well, that's what it's about, this spider race. And these kids are groomed from the time they're little. They're selected for their ability to fight and to do strategy and be really smart on these gaming controls. And they don't realize that it's real, and they're actually fighting at a distance with these remote controls. I don't want to ruin it for anybody who hasn't read the book, but that's
but that's also the Halo. I don't know if you know this, it's also the Halo series. It's based on that,
right? Also
Ready Player One. We're talking about children being taught to battle these various races. Some are actually kind of these beetle-shaped things, and so on. So one of the secret space program supposed things that they were going to do, according to this whistleblower, a Marine called Randy Kramer, I don't know if you know about him, but he announced to an audience at a conference in Pacific Northwest that I was speaking at, that the military had decided to do an alien invasion scenario, that they would have fake aliens. So it's called Project Bluebeam, because they were going to use these, what do you call these? Blue beam.
The hologram laser technology.
And this is very real. It can look incredibly real, and I have testimony on that. But they were going to use that as, the ships and the invaders and so on. And then they were going to go to battle with them. It would be mainly televised. And they would win those battles to show that the military cannot be beaten and all this kind of craziness, right? So this was considered to be a way of waking people up and changing their consciousness such that they would no longer laugh at the idea that we had been invaded by alien beings. This is what our military is actually dealing with. And I have evidence that they've trained military officers in places like Georgia, for example. I had a couple of military witnesses tell me of training exercises where they basically had to go in portals and they were being having battle with various aliens and so on and so forth. In other words, they didn't even know they were being trained for this. They weren't being educated in advance, saying this is what you're going to be doing, so and so. They would just throw them into the situation. So
Wow.
there's so much about our world that is hidden and kept from the people. And we do have movies to thank to some degree for even revealing the tip of the iceberg in this regard, I have to say.
Yep. It's like I always tell people, think about Westworld. There's a TV show, Grimm. There's all these different shows, and they have one theme, that there are people that look like us, talk like us, walk like us, but they're not us. And I think
Right.
that's really where we are today. And certainly that applies to whatever he is, but it's beyond
Yes.
that. It's really that we have been invaded, and the degree is now. We only have 1 minute. Tell us how people can see more of your work. We'll have to do this again. We just didn't. We just
Yeah, you're so fun to talk
to the
to.
surface.
You're wide awake. It's great. So I'm projectcamelotportal.com. And if you join for $3 a month, you get access to all of my work. I'm really a diligent investigative reporter, documentary filmmaker, I think you would say.
We know that. That's great. Well, we thank you so much for taking. I know you're super busy. Thanks for taking your time. And this, like I say, we just scratched the surface. We're going to have to come back and do
Yes,
this again.
it'd be great.
Okay.
Okay. Take
Thank you
care.
so much. And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next week.